Hi all, welcome or welcome back to the Book Owls. In today's session, we are going to discuss about a critical essay which was written by Salman Rushdie titled Outside the Veil, and it has been published in the year 1984. So before moving on to the video, if you are someone new to our channel, please consider to subscribe, and if you did like this video, please don't forget to like. So yes, now we'll move on to our essay. So, Outside the Veil is a critical essay which was written by Salman Rushdie in the year 1984. Now, this particular essay, this appears in his collection, The Imaginary Homelands, which is published in the year 1991. And this particular work, The Imaginary Homeland, is a very, very important, and it is a very important work in literary criticism. And this particular work, The Imaginary Homelands, has about 75 essays which was written during the year 1981 to 1991. Okay, so that was a general introduction to our imaginary homelands as well. Now moving on. Now this particular work, Outside the Veil, it is a essay which has been taken from the collection Imaginary Homelands. Now this particular work is actually a response to George Orwell's famous essay titled Inside the Veil, which was written or published in the year 1940. Now here Rushdie analyzes the role of writers and literature in politics and society during the oppressive times. Now let us discuss what are the major points that's being discussed in this essay. So first of all, as I told earlier, now this is a critical essay, okay, and this serves as a critique to George Orwell's famous essay Inside the Veil, where George Orwell suggested that writers should stay neutral, that is protected from chaos of politics during some political unrest. He also uses the biblical image of Jonah, who was inside the veil. So he uses this image, and also he says that writers like Henry Miller, often detached from politics, he wrote about books like personal books. He wrote about stuffs like love, sex, and he remained apolitical. Okay, George Orwell praises writers like this, and he says that writers should sometimes be neutral, okay, during some political unrest. So Rushdie criticizes this point. Okay, Rushdie says that to be inside the veil is like being so much detached from the world. Rushdie says that to see this retreat, he sees this retreat as a dangerous luxury. He believes that writers do not have the opinion to stay neutral or silent when injustice is happening around him. Okay, so that is what Rushdie points out through this essay. Okay, he says that writers should be critical of the things that are happening around them. They shouldn't stay neutral. And he says that writers needs to be outside the veil, that is, they should be aware, they should be engaged, and they should be loud. And next important point that is being discussed in this essay is literature and responsibility. See, often we consider literature or like men and like writers or anyone privileged leaders, they all have a responsibility towards our society, right? So in the same way, literature, for being a writer or for being a writer, it is like taking up a responsibility. Okay, writers can influence their readers. Okay, they can influence the society. So according to Rushdie says that they should take their pen to influence others. They should take their pen to reshape the society. So Rushdie strongly believes that writing is a form of political action, where in a world where the government censor information, they spread their propaganda, and they suppresses the voice, literature can challenge those powers. And he argues that fiction is not just for entertainment. Writers must take up the responsibility for shaping public opinion. So that is what he says through this essay. And he also says that to stay neutral or not to react to anything is like you are supporting the status quo. Okay, you are supporting the majority, or you are supporting the action of the government, or whatever it is. The next point which he conveys through this essay is that the Thatcher's rule in Britain. One thing that you should keep in mind is that this particular essay was written during the Margaret Thatcher's rule of Britain. Okay, and Margaret Thatcher's rule was very much noted for its political tension being created in the country, for the racism and anti-immigrant policies. So Rushdie, being an immigrant, he was very much voiced to this. Okay, and there was an attack of labor union and working class, and this particular protest led to her resignation following year. And there was strong conservative agenda which she followed, which was both cultural and also political. And there was harsh policies of protest movement, like the miners strike, the race riot. There was racism, all over racism during her time. So one thing we should note is that he wrote this essay during such a political tension that was prevalent in the country. Okay, so he questions that. So he says that Rushdie argues that writers had even more reason to get involved during such time. Okay, Britain, according to him, or like according to anyone, Britain was not an innocent or a neutral place. It was a country which was deeply affected by colonialization, racism, and economic inequality. So he felt that it is a right. It is the right of writers, or it is the responsibility of writers to speak against this. Okay, so that is a very important point that should be noted. This particular essay was written during Margaret Thatcher's rule in Britain. Now the fourth point, moving on to the fourth one, that is he takes examples from literature. That is, he categorizes writers into two. That is, the writers who supported politics, who actively involved in politics, and the other group of writers who detached from it, like George Orwell, he praised Henry Miller for it. Okay, and moving on to the first division, that is the writers who avoided politics. Henry Miller, he says about Henry Miller, who wrote personal and apolitical books about sex, love, and experience. And even some modern writers also choose to maintain that. Okay, that is, they fear that if they get actively involved in politics, sometimes their art might get ruined, or it might become a problem for them. Okay, so they just detach from politics. And moving on to the next group of writers, that is the writers who embraced politics. He mentions a few in his essay. Bertolt Brecht, who is a German playwright who openly criticized fascism and capitalism. Next we have Alexander, who was a Russian writer who was exposed to the Soviet labor camps sites. Next is Gabriel Garcia Marquez, okay, who used his magical realism to show the corruption of Latin American regimes. And the final one is Ngugi wa Thiong'o, who is a Kenyan writer who wrote in his native language, and he went to prison for his activism. We have works of Ngugi wa Thiong'o titled A Trial of Dedan Kimathi in our channel. So if you want, you can just go and watch it. And Rushdie admires such writers. He says that fiction is a tool of resistance rather than a place to hide. So he urges writers to come out of the veil, to be aware of the world that is outside. Okay. And next important point that is being discussed in this essay is the Raj fiction. You know what is Raj fiction? Raj fiction is that we all know that British, being a colonizer, the writers used to glorify their role in those countries, in the colonialized ones. Okay, that is, they took up the role of civilizing the people around them, and they often distort history. That is, they make their role become like they portray their role in a very positive, sentimental, and a heroic way, and thereby they totally ignore the brutality and the exploitation and also the racism of the colonialization and the division that they created in the colonized nations. Okay, and so he criticizes this thing. He criticizes the Raj fiction. So what is Raj fiction? Raj fiction just refers to the nostalgic novels or films that portray British Raj or the colonial rule in a very positive, sentimental, and a heroic way. Okay, and he says that this type of portrayal is distorting the history. He rejects this nostalgia and calls it dangerous. Romanticizing the British Empire to him is a distortion of history. He wants literature to remember the violence, the suppression, and the injustice of the colonial rule and not gloss over it with a soft storytelling. So that is another important point which is being mentioned in this essay. Moving on to the next point, that is the role of the writers. So he say that writers, they are not just artists, okay, they are the witness of the society. They can be witness, they can be activist as well. And sometimes a writer should also be a soldier or a warrior. We often quote that a pen is mightier than a sword, right? So he can use his tool. So his for a writer, his tool, sorry, for a writer, his weapon is the pen. He can use his pen to reshape the society. He says that writers must take sides when human rights are violated. He also says that writers have the power to shape narratives, to question propaganda, and to fight the ignorance. Okay, so these are all the major points that is being discussed in Salman Rushdie's Outside the Veil. Okay, so in short, Outside the Veil is a critique against to George Orwell's famous essay Inside the Veil. Okay, where in this essay he asks or he urges, he urges writers to come up and to take action against the social unrest or the political tension that is being around him. So that is all this essay about. Yeah, thanks for watching.